Blast light is the world's smallest and most convenient UVC disinfection light to help keep you safe against COVID-19. I take mine everywhere I go. Go to davidpakman.com/blastlight to get it for 40% off. The link is down below. Well, we suspected it might happen because of the increasingly uncontrolled spread of the Delta variant and the resurgence in COVID-19 cases. And it is happening. The CDC coming out with new mask guidelines yesterday. We are going backwards. The masks are going back on in many, many places. And seemingly overnight, I'm already seeing more masks just walking around. And yes, this is even for vaccinated people. We're going to look at the new guidelines, and I am going to sort of couch it all in saying the situation has not really changed that dramatically for vaccinated people, although it has changed, and it's important to understand the ways in which it has. But this is continuing to increasingly be a virus that is being spread by unvaccinated people, which is disproportionately seriously affecting unvaccinated people. And that for now appears to be the way it is going to continue. But that doesn't mean, given what's going on, that vaccinated people shouldn't take precautions in certain places. So let's look at the new CDC guidelines updated yesterday. When you've been fully vaccinated, okay, if you are fully vaccinated, you can participate in many of the activities that you did before the pandemic. To maximize protection from the Delta variant and prevent possibly spreading it to others, wear a mask indoors in public if you are in an area of substantial or high transmission. That is a major change. Whereas before, the position was if you're vaccinated, you don't really need to wear a mask anywhere. The new guidelines are if you're vaccinated, but you're indoors in public, meaning not with 5 other people whose vaccination status but if you're in public indoors and in an area of high transmission, which you can look at a county by county level, substantial or high transmission, the new recommendation is to wear a mask. For me, what does that mean? Well, that means when I go to the grocery store, the mask is going back on. It goes on to say the new guidelines, wearing a mask is most important if you have a weakened immune system or if because of your age or an underlying medical condition, you are at increased risk for severe disease, or if someone in your household has a weakened immune system, is at increased risk for severe disease, or is unvaccinated. If this applies to you or your household, you might choose to wear a mask regardless of the level of transmission in your area. You should continue to wear a mask where required by laws, rules, regulations, or local guidance. So this is a significant change, and we are seeing the spike. I mean, if you look at the U.S. case numbers, you will see that starting, right around June 22nd, about a month ago, after getting down below 10,000 cases per day, cases started to go up, including even some 65,000 case days, now up to an average of about 57,000 cases per day. Now, what's the hope here? The hope is that much like we are starting to see in some other countries, for example, if you look at the UK, which was essentially one of the hubs of the Delta variant, we have already apparently hit the peak of cases in the UK. The peak in the UK of Delta seems to have happened around July 22nd, and they are now down from about 46,000 cases a day to about 32,000. That's a significant reduction. The hope is that what is now a sort of leveling out, as you can see, over the last few days, the cases aren't continuing to increase in the U.S. They're sort of flattening out. The hope would be we are now going to be on the decline, but we don't know if we are. And part of that depends, of course, on taking precautions. So let's not go crazy one way or the other. I think there's a lot of hyperbole on both sides here, and I'm not playing a both sides game. The people responsible for this are overwhelmingly the unvaccinated people and the people taking no precautions. But the reactions have been sort of extreme on both sides. There's one side that 2 months ago said the pandemic is over. Many of these people were never wearing masks. Many of these people are still not vaccinated, and they're going back and to quote Dr. Anthony Fauci, letting it rip. That's an extreme reaction on one side because it's clearly not over. On the other side are the people who are seeing this and now saying, we are back to the pre-vaccine uncontrolled spread era. The truth is that for the Delta variant, if you're vaccinated, you're very well protected. And that protection is bolstered by people around you being vaccinated. Now, just like with the flu, there are people who are vaccinated, who are otherwise mostly healthy, who will get what's called a breakthrough case, and they will end up hospitalized, and a few of them are going to die. And that's a terrible and tragic thing. But it's important to remember that that also happens with the flu. And that doesn't mean we ignore this fact, but it also doesn't mean that we all of a sudden believe there's no protection and we're going back to the pre-vaccine COVID era. The truth is that for the most part, you are quite well protected if you are vaccinated. You are really unlikely to get very sick. You are really unlikely to die. However, you could spread it. You could spread it to someone who is in a more compromised position. And although that's the situation with the Delta variant, the more people remain unvaccinated and the more the spread continues, the next variant could be more deadly. The next variant could be even more transmissible. And as we've said before, imagine if this had an 8% mortality rate or a 10% mortality rate. I don't know that people are looking to read about this type of stuff right now. I don't know, people are looking for this type of fiction. But I recently read Lawrence Wright's pandemic novel. I believe it's called The End of October, where it's a very similar situation to the one we have, except it's like a 10% death rate instead of a 0.8% death rate or whatever we believe the real infection fatality rate to be. That is a dramatically different situation. The more we don't get vaccinated and the more this continues to spread, it increases the chances of such a variant developing in the future. So these are the rules at this point in time. People asking me if I'm canceling my upcoming travel. I'm not. And the reason I'm not is this situation of different pops and spreads, particularly among the unvaccinated, is likely to continue for a couple of years. And so if I'm not willing to travel now, I probably shouldn't travel for years. And I've made the decision in speaking with friends who are doctors and others that right now, based on when I got vaccinated and based on this particular variant and based on the fact that I'll be wearing a mask everywhere that it's recommended, I don't see a particular reason to cancel that trip now. But a lot of the questions are, where are you going and what is your health status, et cetera. One example, we're talking on the bonus show today, Nevada is going fully masked back on, and people are being advised to avoid Las Vegas. The level of uncontrolled spread in Las Vegas is so high. The case positivity rate is so high that that's a point where people are being told, just don't go there. And I don't plan to. So that's the situation there. I want to talk about two things we've talked about many times before, but not together. And those two topics are, on the one hand, anti and pseudo-intellectualism, and on the other hand, the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, COVID, of course, we've talked about for a year and a half, every week, and sometimes even more often. We've tracked cases, we've tracked deaths, variants, masks, vaccines, and everything in between. We've also talked about anti-intellectual and pseudo-intellectual movements, and that's a really big topic. And this goes back to the genesis of American intellectualism in the 1800s, or even arguably earlier than that. But it also includes simply an analysis of people who read books by authors like Tucker Carlson and Bill O'Reilly, and they start to think that they're educated and they have a well-rounded and nuanced and detailed view of how the world works, and the belief that one is much more informed than they actually are. But these two issues, anti-intellectualism and COVID, are very much linked. There's a really good study in Nature that was published a few months ago called Anti-Intellectualism and the Mass Public's Response to the COVID-19 Pandemic. And when I was looking through this recently, I realized that many of our previous discussions about anti-intellectualism apply perfectly to what's been going on with this pandemic in the United States. It applies to mask wearing. It applies to anti-vaccine sentiment and to so much more. And the article does a number of different things to assess how people came to believe incorrect things about the pandemic, be it about the virus itself or about public health measures or vaccines or whatever else. And the conclusion is not going to be a surprise. The article finds, quote, "We provide evidence of a consistent connection between anti-intellectualism and COVID-19 risk perceptions social distancing, mask usage, misperceptions, and information acquisition. Very, very much not unsurprising finding. So there are actually two sides to the people that still won't get vaccinated, that still think masks don't do anything, who think the virus is fake or whatever. Part of it is that they are part of a political movement whose leaders spent basically all of 2020 telling them this isn't very serious. We don't need to do anything. Open everything. The economy is what matters most. That's part of it, which is politics, plain and simple. But the side we haven't talked about as much is the anti-intellectualism, a distrust of scientists and doctors, a distrust of authority, feeling that they know more, much like Trump always felt that he knew more than his generals or doctors or whoever, because they read whatever it was on Facebook or because their uncle told them whatever it was. Now, you might say, well, that anti-intellectual view is based on their politics, so it really is still politics. And I would agree with you. But these are still two distinct but related phenomena. And then the last piece of this that I want to discuss is that the anti-intellectualism and the rejection of science is very postmodern, which these right-wingers claim to be against. Now, of course, most of the right-wingers who talk about postmodernism don't have an iota of a clue, not even a scintilla of an idea of what postmodernism is. But to the extent that they sort of understand it, right-wingers claim to hate the postmodern idea that they say exists on the left, that every narrative is equally valid, every opinion must be given the same consideration as every other. And I'll tell you what, I'm also against that. I've talked about my opposition to that idea, that every narrative, every idea must be given equal consideration. But those very same people are furious that their anti-vaccine misperceptions, that their COVID conspiracy delusions aren't being given the same weight, the same consideration, the same seat at the table as what medical doctors and public health officials and science says. It's truly the height of hypocrisy. So we have a political movement that spent all of last year saying you don't really need to worry about this, and that's a big factor. And then, yes, we also have this anti-intellectual, pseudo-intellectual component of people who, because they looked at Facebook, think that they know as much as or more than the public health officials. But then the third layer on top of it is the incredible hypocrisy of being against the culture they believe exists on the left. And it exists in some enclaves of the left, although I don't think it's predominant, that every idea must be given an equal seat at the table. But that's exactly what they want and what they expect with their ideas about vaccines and masks and whatever else. And they become furious when social media platforms or elected officials or whoever say, hey, you know what you're saying just isn't based in science. So we don't need to give it equal consideration. It's hypocrisy plus anti and pseudo-intellectualism plus the politics of the Republican Party around the virus in 2020. Let me know what you think. And is there something missing from that three-layered analysis? I would love to hear from you and add to it in a future segment. We are getting very close, my friends, to the 16th anniversary of the David Pakman Show. August 16th is that day, the 16th anniversary of the David Pakman Show. To celebrate, we will be doing a one-day membership special. If you've been listening for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 16 years, and you've occasionally thought, I kind of like this, maybe I'll support it in some way, the perfect day to do it is August 16th. If you want to get an email telling you how to take advantage of our 16th anniversary discount, just get on my mailing list at davidpakman.com. One of our sponsors is Blast Light, the smallest and most convenient UV disinfection light on the market. COVID is not over. There are new variants. There might be future resurgences. So, of course, it's still important to take precautions, keep yourself safe, keep people around you safe. UVC lights have been proven to safely and rapidly kill bacteria, mold, fungi, and viruses, including COVID-19. Blast Light is a convenient keychain UVC light that you can take wherever you go. I keep it attached to my keys. It goes everywhere with me. It's easy to use. It disinfects any surface in just seconds with a really long battery life, and it's rechargeable. I've looked at a bunch of different UVC light options, and this is by far the most compact and portable one out there. Blast Light is normally $99, but my audience can get it for 40% off, which comes to $59.50 when you go to davidpakman.com/blastlight. The link is underneath this video. Remember that this program, this one today, is mostly made possible by folks like you who get memberships at joinpakman.com. I encourage you to grab such a membership. You'll also get instant access to the daily members only bonus show, an extra show every single day. You know, one of the biggest scams perpetrated and perpetuated by the American right is that they are the patriotic ones. They are the ones who support the troops. They are the ones who support the police. They are the ones who are about America first. And as if you needed more proof that this is an utter and pathetic lie, over the last 24 hours, we have seen, first of all, Republicans, right-wingers, and right-wing media hosts literally root against the United States in the Olympics, rooting against the women's soccer team, or rooting for other countries to win. Make fun of gymnast Simone Biles for her pulling out of competition yesterday / the day before yesterday, with the time difference with Tokyo. I don't know exactly when it was, over the last 24 to 36 hours, making fun of her. Not exactly America first patriotic behavior in terms of how you would relate to or discuss someone who's halfway around the world representing the United States in athletic competition. And then yesterday, after the first day of testimony of the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th Trump riots, after 4 police officers whose lives were threatened as they attempted to defend the Capitol on January 6th, widely, Republicans and right-wing media hosts ridiculed the police officers and laughed at the police officers and made a mockery of the things that they said in their testimony yesterday. We're going to look at some clips, and just remember when you look at this, they say they support police. They say they defend law enforcement. They call themselves patriotic. Here is Tucker Carlson literally chuckling at the things we heard from one of the officers, Officer Fanone, yesterday. Look at this.
People he doesn't agree with in Washington. And that is unacceptable, and it should make you very nervous. Watch Fanone cite the psychological trauma he endured as an excuse for ditching our Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
I've been left with the psychological trauma and the emotional anxiety of having survived such a horrific event.
A very dismissive chuckle from Tucker Carlson. This guy, we're supposed to believe he's a patriot and that he supports the troops and he supports police, except when he doesn't, because it's just really not convenient. It's really not convenient because if you say, wow, we should listen to the testimony of these officers, it implies some really horrible things about the people who participated in those Trump riots. Next, here is a clip from Newsmax. This is host Grant Stinkfield. Grant has never been a law enforcement officer, didn't serve in the military, but he refers to Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who is a veteran, as a pansy. And then he mocks another Capitol police officer when the police officer told us that he thought he was actually going to die on January 6th. Let's look at the next clip.
And later on from other law enforcement agencies, I'm afraid to think what could have happened on January 6th.
So, Grant, that's a pretty good question. Do you expect that this will answer that question or pursue it further?
No. I love that he's reading the statement. I think the statement may have actually backfired on him because, you know, the leader of the Capitol Police really is Nancy Pelosi.
By the way, what does it mean? I love that he's reading the statement. Is that like a dig at that officer is from the Dominican Republic? Is it a dig at the guy's English language proficiency? I don't even know what it means that he says, I love that he's reading it. Like, oh, if he wasn't reading it, he wouldn't be able to speak. I don't even understand what that means.
So you've got to ask Nancy Pelosi about why they didn't have the backup they so-called needed. But, you know, Heather, as I watched this hearing, they told us it wasn't going to be political. And then I got this pansy of a Congressman, Adam Kinzinger, crying as if he can't hold it together here. It's nonsensical. It's about the most political thing I've ever seen. It is all theater, typical to Democratic fashion. It is all based in emotion. I'm having a real hard time believing a lot of what I'm hearing because the video doesn't back up nearly all of it. One officer said he thought it was going to be the moment he died. Well, there were no guns at this place. I've watched guns at Black Lives Matter protests and riots. I've watched bricks being thrown at officers during Black Lives.
Now, this was addressed extensively, and there was not only a very long list of weapons described by the officers, but also officers described the belief that there were firearms there. Although we should be glad that the protesters didn't start shooting. That's something to be happy about, not indignant about.
Lives Matter, Antifa riots. I didn't see any of that during this. So this is going to be a partisan event. Brace yourselves. I refuse to lead my show with it tonight. We will most certainly talk about it. But there's no way I am giving this sham of a hearing the due of being at the top of my program.
Yeah, so Stinkfield will be talking about it, but he is not going to lead the show with it. Very principled and defiant production decision there by Grant Stinkfield. Not very deferential to police, not back the blue, not the thin blue line. It's none of that stuff all of a sudden because they only care about that when it's convenient. Here's Republican Congressman Jim Banks. This is one of the guys that Nancy Pelosi said, no, you're not going to be on this panel. He is blaming the police for what happened on January 6th. Wow.
So today was the first day, again, tragic stories from Capitol Police officers, experiences that never should have happened.
Right.
If the leadership of the Capitol Police and those who oversaw the Capitol Police would have done their job leading up to January 6th, we would have trained the Capitol Police officers.
So what happened to the police on January 6th is the fault of the police because of what they didn't do leading up to January 6th. I see. It's the fact that Trump incited a riot and then they rioted and they beat police officers with flagpoles and bear spray and all this different stuff. It's the fault of the police, guys. Remember, this guy supports the police. He's all very much pro law enforcement.
Would have given them better equipment. We would have warned them about the intelligence report. And I believe that January 6th would have been a lot different if the Capitol Police leadership would have done their job, if there would have been true leadership at the top and oversight. That didn't happen. And why are those questions not allowed to be asked on this committee? What is the speaker trying to hide by not allowing me and Jim Jordan in the room to ask questions about exactly?
Well, Jim Jordan we're going to talk about a little bit later, but it's becoming increasingly clear that Jim Jordan has no place on that committee because he's an accomplice. He can't possibly investigate it because he appears to have been an accomplice, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Jim Banks, of course, also voted not to certify the election, part of perpetuating the big lie. These people are truly disgusting. And then lastly, here is Laura Ingraham from Fox News. She actually had the gall to call the testimony from the officers' performances and ridiculed them by giving out performance awards. Take a look at this.
I want you to get to the bottom of that.
We have more on him in a moment, but it's not about politics at all. And for best performance in an action role, the winner is Michael Fanone.
Too many are now telling me that hell doesn't exist or that hell actually wasn't that bad. The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
All right. So Laura Ingraham making a mockery of the entire thing. And this is the movement that claims they support police. This is the movement that claims that they are the defenders of law enforcement. But that's only when it's convenient to them. These people are really disgusting. We have some very interesting political election news. In the Texas 6th Congressional District Republican primary, this is two Republicans running against each other. The Trump-endorsed candidate lost, and it wasn't a huge blowout, but it was a loss. And this is our first signal about 2022, which is going to serve to inform what happens in 2024 from the standpoint of the Republican presidential candidate and whether that will be Donald Trump. Remember that we are working backwards now. In 2024, Republicans will need some candidate to run for president. The question is that going to be Donald Trump? Well, Trump running in 24 will be informed by how do the Trump-backed candidates do in November of 2022? How do Republicans do in November of 2022 in the House and the Senate? Well, to get to that, you have to start looking at some of the primaries that are taking place right now. And in the Texas 6th Congressional District, so far, Donald Trump has one loss. In that Texas Congressional District, Jake Ellzey, the non-Trump Republican, has defeated the Trump-backed rival Susan Wright. So chalk this up as a loss for Donald Trump. Let's take a look. Republican Jake Ellzey of Texas won a House seat on Tuesday night over a rival backed by Donald Trump, dealing the former president a defeat in a test of his endorsement power since leaving office. Ellzey's come from behind victory over Republican Susan Wright, the widow of the late Rep. Ron Wright, is a special congressional election runoff near Dallas, is likely to be celebrated by Trump antagonists who have warned against his continued hold on the Republican Party. Ellzey was carrying more than 53% of the vote in Texas's 6th congressional district, with results from almost all precincts reported. One of the things we've seen from this campaign is a positive outlook. A Reagan Republican outlook for the future of our country is what the people of the 6th district really, really want, Ellzey said to supporters. The runoff election came down to the two Republicans in a race to succeed Congressman Ron Wright, who in February became the first member of Congress to die after being diagnosed with COVID-19. Susan Wright, a Republican Party activist and widow of the late congressman, carried the endorsement of Trump into the special election runoff. A few differences in policy separated the candidates, giving the race in North Texas the feel of a Republican primary. Far from running on an anti-Trump platform, Ellzey did not try distancing himself from the twice impeached former president. He instead sought to overcome the lack of Trump's backing by raising more money and showing off endorsements, including that of Rick Perry. So this is actually a really big deal. In a sense, 2024 is now. And what I mean by that is we are getting into, although we still have a little while, this was a special runoff. We still have some months until they really get going, but we're starting to get into primaries for 2022, which are going to determine what happens in November of 2022, which will determine what happens in 2024. And Donald Trump already backing some primary candidates, and the first one here has lost. This was the Trump candidate, and they did not win. So this is, it's a sample size of one. We still don't know what it portends for the bigger idea of Donald Trump being a kingmaker in 2022. But this is already an interesting sign. And when I was interviewed by Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, a couple of weeks ago, Cohen said he doesn't think Trump is ultimately going to run. And the reason Trump won't run is it's going to be clear to Trump that he's not going to win if he runs in 2024. That's Michael Cohen's perspective. He may well be right. He's been right about many things, and he's been, not right about some things. If indeed Trump is going to be convinced that he's not going to win, part of it will be that the people he chooses, the people he backs for 2022, lose. And that is at least what we saw in the Texas 6th Congressional District. We'll have more coverage of that race and others that are upcoming on the David Pakman Show Instagram, which you can find at David Pakman Show. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time, and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpakman.com. All right, I want to sort of just close the loop on a couple of stories that we've been talking about. The CEO of MyPillow, Mike Lindell, who became a Trump friend early during the pandemic and said Trump was a gift from God. And we thought that's probably as crazy as this guy's going to get. And then, of course, it got crazier and crazier. Mike Lindell, who claims that he has voting machines in his possession, that same Mike Lindell, he is now sort of reversing the burden of proof after saying he is going to be able to prove that the election was actually stolen by Joe Biden. Now he's reversing it and saying he will give you $5 million if you can prove to him that the election wasn't stolen, wasn't stolen by Joe Biden, which is, of course, a very, very different situation. Business Insider reporting Mike Lindell is offering $5 million to anyone who can disprove his allegations of voter fraud if they show up to his cyber symposium. He's going to be doing this symposium in August. Mike Lindell, a staunch ally of Trump, leading promoter of voter fraud conspiracy theories, says he'd give $5 million to anyone who can disprove data that he claims shows election interference. But there's a catch. To be eligible, you have to attend his upcoming cyber symposium, which is taking place in South Dakota between August 10 and 12. So there's 5 million available, guys, but you've got to go to South Dakota and deal with Mike Lindell and people who support him for 3 days. And the event isn't open to the public, according to an ad for the event posted on Lindell's website, Frank. Invitees include politicians, cybersecurity experts, and the media, though it will also be streamed for 72 hours on Frank. Lindell said he wants the symposium to be the most watched live event in history and is aiming for 1 billion people to watch via his website. I can't imagine 1 billion people are going to watch this. He has reserved 800 rooms, but few officials said they would attend. There's also there's a funny other thing to this, which is he wants media to attend, but like normal reporters, they can't take a free room from him. They need to reserve their own rooms to maintain independence, and it's just standard protocol. So there's actually reporters who have said, in theory, I would go to this thing, but because he reserved all of the rooms, I can't take a free room from Mike Lindell, because then my reporting could potentially have been influenced by the fact that I got a free room. I'd have to say I got a free room, etc. So he's almost shooting himself in the foot. Okay, here is a clip where Mike Lindell talks about the $5 million.
Today, I'm putting out $5 million to any attendee that comes to this, that's invited to the symposium, if they can prove the data is not the 2020 election.
Did you just say $5 million? Did you just say $5 million?
That's correct.
Yeah. So just, the concept of burden of proof, it's shifting from I have proof that something happened to you prove to me that it didn't happen. As many of you know, when we've talked about burden of proof and logical fallacies, proving a negative can be very, very difficult. And in fact, many conspiracy theories are based on the fact that they put others in a position of having to prove that X did not happen. Whereas really, if they are the ones making the claim, they should be able to bring us evidence that X did happen. One other really funny thing, and there's a visual component here, which if you're not watching, you're not going to fully appreciate. There was this exclusive appearance that Mike Lindell did, I guess, on his own show, where he revealed the packet captures which prove the election was stolen. What you're going to see is it looks like the Matrix. It's just long numbers scrolling up the screen. It's of no meaning whatsoever. There's no column headings. Take a look at this, and I'll describe it if you're just listening today.
This is big news.
Yeah, this is big news. Why don't you I want you to put once again, they were announcing, put the data back up there again, or let it roll again.
Roll that data again. It's rolling right now.
Okay.
Right. I really want everybody to know that this is, that this is what the cyber guys are going to see. This is the real deal here, everybody. This is the first time. Well, tonight we had a show earlier, but today, what's the date today, Brandon?
Today is July 22nd. Thursday, July 22nd.
Thursday, July 22nd.
Okay, so all that's happening is numbers are scrolling up the screen like crazy. And this is supposed to prove that Joe Biden didn't really win the election. And as if we need to take this seriously, but some cybersecurity people looked at it. And again, it's like, you don't really need cybersecurity people to look at it, but then there's no column headings. You can't match these numbers to anything in particular. They're not evidence of voter fraud of any kind, never mind fraud that suggests it was actually Donald Trump who won even a single state that he lost. Like, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So anyway, if you want to go to South Dakota between August 10 and 12, and I guess pay to go, I don't know if you have to pay to go or not, to this symposium, and then you can prove that Joe Biden won, or that there wasn't fraud, I guess better said, there's $5 million in it for you. Okay, as many of you know, I am not a Christian. I truly don't understand that much about Christianity, but I do feel like I have a sense of crazy when I see it. And today I have video for you of Pastor Dan Burgoyne from California playing with dog poop, shoving his hands into dog poop during a sermon to, I guess, make some kind of point about sin or something like that. Now, I want to warn people, if you're having breakfast, if you're having lunch, whatever you're doing, there is going to be video here of the pastor doing scatological play with dog poop on stage during a sermon. Now, shockingly, there is context here, which is my discussion yesterday of the tax exemption that churches receive in the United States. I mentioned it offhandedly, but I got a ton of emails from people talking about, David, I agree or I disagree with your point about churches and tax exemption. So warning, we are going to look at a video here in which this guy is playing with dog poop. Check out the build up to this stunt. And importantly, consider whether this type of thing is what we, the taxpayers, should be subsidizing so that churches can do this and yet not pay taxes. Let's take a look.
So do you know what God equates as sin in the Bible? He equates poop, filth in the Bible. No, this is not a brownie. No, this is not Snickers bar. I own 2 bull mastiffs in my life. This is Great Dane.
Dear God.
Do you know how...
What a crappy idea, guys.
God sees. Now listen, this is important. Psalm 141 verse 2. May my prayer be set before you like what? Like incense. May the lifting of my hands be like the evening sacrifices. Your sin, God says, has hidden my face from you so that I will not hear. So when you come in and you're saying, God, the gods of my life compete with who you are, but I'm declaring that I belong.
Are you guys understanding how this is building up to smearing himself with dog poop? Because I'm not.
God says, this is what I see.
Whoa. Really trying to score some brownie points with God, we might say.
And what I see comes up like incense before me.
Oh, my God.
And what's going on in your soul, I can see in ways nobody
else.
He's
playing with it like clay now.
Can see. And so you know what you say? Oh, God, create in me a clean heart and renew in me a right spirit, and cast me not from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. And you got chunks coming off of your thumb, and God is saying, what do you want? Do you want me or do you want you? Do you want your ways or do you want my ways? Because you can't have what you're getting the way you think.
What a crappy way to make a point, don't you think? So that's a church. They're tax exempt. Burgoyne quotes Psalm 141. I guess it's verse 2 or line 2 about lifting one's hands up to God. I think maybe the point he's trying to make is that we are merely dog poop without God or something like that. So what is this desperation? Is this mental illness? What is it? Is it grifting of some kind? And at some point, if you're spending your Sunday digging through your own dog's poop in a church on a stage, don't you have to reconsider whether God has laid out a good life for you? At some point, isn't that a question? Is this what God wants you to be doing, playing with poop in a church? And this is what gets me back again to the blanket tax exemption for churches. I get it. If a church runs a soup kitchen, organize it separately, give them a tax exemption. If a church even runs a school, even if it's a religious education, if they're doing good education otherwise and teaching real stuff, let them organize as a nonprofit educational institution. But we have millions of people who are lacking health care. We have hunger in the United States. We have people without homes, etc. But this guy gets a tax exemption for scatological games. Something is very, very wrong. And I remain convinced that the blanket tax exemption for churches needs to be done away with. I'm not saying there aren't situations where it makes sense that a church would be tax exempt, but this stuff has to stop. This stuff absolutely has to stop. Send me your thoughts And, just a crappy story to go to break on here. If you value what we do at the David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and t-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. All right, I have for you today some of the funniest video I've seen come out of the political world for at least a day or two. No, for at least several months. Two Republican members of Congress, Matt Gaetz, currently under investigation for a litany of possible crimes, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, anti-mask, anti-vax congresswoman who regularly compares things to the Holocaust and then apologizes for doing it and then does it again. They tried to hold a press conference. Now, the press conference was meant to be, think about this, in defense of the January 6th Trump rioters, in defense of the rioters, not the police. Gaetz and Greene, who normally claim to be all about supporting the troops and supporting the police, Gaetz and Greene apparently believe that the defendants, the accused rioters, are being treated too harshly by our legal system in terms of their detentions and the like. This is not an issue they have any other time, except when you have exclusively Trump supporters having been the alleged perpetrators. Now, all of a sudden, they care about the harsh treatment of these defendants by the justice system. So they hold this press conference, and imagine that being your primary concern related to the January 6th riots, instead of actually investigating what happened and who incited it. But that's their position. So they try to hold a press conference. When I say try, I say that because it goes hilariously off the rails when protesters shut it down with screaming and whistles, and our friend Lauren Windsor asking Matt Gaetz on repeat whether he's a pedophile. Let's get into the first clip. And the funniest part of this one is it gets shut down. And Louis Gohmert, a wacky Republican congressman, he sort of tries to just keep going, but nobody cares. Once Gaetz and Greene start leaving, nobody even listens to Louis. Take a look at this. It's everything about it is perfect.
The people of this country, the answers to the questions.
We need a break. The left is interrupting the press conference. We need to end it.
Thank you. For those of you that really care about this process.
It's just amazing. The Whistler interrupts the press conference. Louis Gohmert tries to speak, but it's just too late. Nobody cares. Everybody's just leaving.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw here today is, again, the intolerant left.
And that the voice you heard there is, I guess, an anchor of some kind for the YouTube channel Right Side Broadcasting Network. So the whistles are just absolutely fascinating. The entire thing gets shut down. Here's another clip of the Whistler really preventing this from even getting going. I mean, it's really incredible. So that's actually the Whistler in the yellow shirt, if people are watching, right in front of the Right Side Broadcasting anchor, just whistling and whistling.
Please back up. Please back up. No, you're hurting me.
They're hurting you.
Okay, no, they're not. They're not touching you.
We have it on video, sir.
Back up.
You blowing a whistle in people's ears, damaging their hearing.
All right, now, I'm against hearing loss and doing anything that's going to force hearing loss on people, of course. I think it is important to remember that, there is an onus on, if you want to hold a press conference in public, then there's the possibility that because it's in public, people are going to show up. I think that it starts to get over the line if you blow the whistle really loud right in someone's ear. I'm right there on that. But the same way that you are choosing to speak in a public place, people can choose to yell or blow a whistle in a public place as well. And then just the level of derailment is crazy. Let's look at one more of these clips.
Are you trying to assault people with auditory weapons?
It's a weapon now. Now there were no weapons at the January 6th riots, but the whistle is a weapon now. I mean, it's actually quite stunning how much havoc and chaos one guy with a whistle can actually wreak at this one event. Okay, so then we get into the point where Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, they essentially just get run out and they start literally running away with security or staffers or whoever. And then this is where there's another layer to the mimetic aspect of this. Matt Gaetz starts to be asked on repeat whether he's a pedophile. And it turns out that that's actually Lauren Windsor, who we is a friend of the show. Take a look at this.
Somebody take them away.
Off they go.
You saw what happened here. The left shut us down. Yeah. They hate free speech. They hate free speech.
Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile?
Get back.
Are you a pedophile, Congressman Gaetz? Are you a pedophile? Congressman, are you a pedophile?
Oh my God. Now, obviously, child sex abuse and pedophilia is not funny. The image of Lauren with a huge camera, like who even uses a camera that big anymore? It almost could be a prop and it would add to the comedic element. Chasing Gaetz and saying, "Are you a pedophile?" is amazing. Now we actually have Lauren's video from Undercurrent with a different view on this. Take a look.
Congressman Gaetz, are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile, Congressman Gaetz? Excuse me. Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile, Congressman Gaetz?
Dear God.
Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile, Congressman?
Get out of here.
Congressman, are you a pedophile?
Get back.
Are you a pedophile, Congressman Gaetz? Are you a pedophile? Congressman, are you a pedophile? Are you a pedophile, Congressman Gaetz?
Are you sure?
Are you sure you're not a pedophile?
Oh man. So just absolute and total chaos. And again, it all goes back to the whole point of this press conference was that yesterday we had the first day of testimony in the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th riots. And the reaction from Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene is, whoa, they're really not treating the accused rioters very well in the justice system. And of course, you and I have been talking about the fact that too often nonviolent defendants are held without bail or held with a bail that's too high for them to make. So they're stuck in pretrial detention. They can't mount a defense. They're unable to make money. They're unable to parent their kids if they have kids. And it just perpetuates the situation. We've talked about that when it comes to nonviolent defendants. They now are all of a sudden concerned about bail being too high or bail being denied to people accused of actual violence in some of these cases. And now all of a sudden they care and they want criminal justice reform. I mean, it's just all completely and totally pathetic. And the entire thing getting shut down. Who knew that a whistle? I mean, listen, I remember being 8. I remember wreaking havoc with a whistle, but I was never able to wreak this amount of havoc. And it's absolutely fascinating to see. All right, we've got to get to something really, really important. This needs to be, I am going to show you a video that justifies launching a new investigation into Republican Congressman Jim Jordan and whether he was an accomplice in a greater way than we already knew to the January 6th riots. Think back a week to when Nancy Pelosi said Jim Jordan and Jim Banks can't be on this committee investigating the January 6th riots. And at the time I said, Jim Jordan is more likely a witness or a co-conspirator than he can really in any realistic way be an investigator of what took place on January 6th. He appeared yesterday on Fox News with Brett Baier. And Brett Baier asked him, did you speak to Trump on January 6th? And Jim Jordan is caught, obviously, trying to obfuscate. You've got to see this. Let's listen to it line by line. OK, here we go.
The committee is obviously going to go down a number of different roads about who knew what when, who was talking to coordinators of the protest. Did you talk to the former president that day?
I've talked to the former president umpteen times, thousands. I mean, not thousands.
OK. Did you talk to the president on January 6th? And Jordan says, I've talked to the president umpteen times. And Brett Baer tries to clarify exactly the date on which he's referring to.
The former president umpteen times, thousands, I mean not thousands
on
times,
January
but countless times. I talked to the president. I never talk about what we talk about. I just don't.
Okay, so he's still, now he says, I talked to the president. He's still not saying on that day, but it seems to be what he's conceding here.
That's appropriate, just like I don't talk about what happens in Republican conferences. So
Sure.
I've talked to the president numerous times. I continue to talk to the president since he's left
on
office.
January 6th, Congressman.
Yes, I've talked to the president. I've talked to the president so many, I can't remember.
So he seems to be realizing he can't just lie and say no. And he seems to be realizing Brett Baer is going to keep asking the question. So he tries to slide it in and says, yes, meaning, yes, I did speak to Trump on January 6th, but I've talked to him so many times, I can't even remember all the times I've talked to him.
All the days I've talked to him, but I've certainly talked to the president.
Yeah. And on that day can you share any of the insight of what he was thinking about that day?
Very clear question. What's the relevance? The relevance is I Alone Can Fix It. The book from Carol Leonnig and Philip Rucker says it has multiple sources who say Trump was basically giddy on January 6th. The reason Trump didn't send in the National Guard is he loved what was going on. He was giddy. He was absolutely loving it. And my guess is that when Jim Jordan spoke to Trump, Trump expressed being thrilled about what was going on. Now, what Jim Jordan said, we don't know, but it's obvious why Jim Jordan doesn't want to talk about what that conversation was like.
Brett, the people we need to come testify are the people who can testify to the fundamental questions.
Well, one of those people might be Jim Jordan. What exactly was Trump's mental state when you spoke to him? Was he giddy about the riots?
Why didn't the United States Capitol, the People's House, have an appropriate security posture on that day? And what have we done? Those are the people we need to hear from. Yeah. That's the information and testimony we need to get. That's what we should focus on. But I don't think that Benny Thompson, the chairman of this committee, said
the question wasn't about Benny Thompson. You know, the question was about your conversation with Trump.
Things on the table until we raise this issue about the Speaker's office is the one who knows what the security posture and why it was the way it was. Once we raise that question, he said, well, everything's on the table.
Okay, so he clearly doesn't want to talk about what he said to Donald Trump. Now, what do we know about Jim Jordan? Well, we know that Jim Jordan was part of a meeting of House Republicans that took place in advance of January 6th about how to overturn the election. We know Jim Jordan was there. It's been widely reported. We are aware that on December 21st of 2020, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Mo Brooks, and Louis Gohmert, really a cast of characters, were spotted at the White House, and the reports are that they met with Donald Trump. So we know Jim Jordan met with Trump about how to overturn the results in advance of January 6th. We know that Jim Jordan voted against certifying the results. And we now know that Jim Jordan, through his obfuscation and his distraction, we know that Jim Jordan also spoke to Donald Trump on January 6th. We also know that Trump was reportedly giddy on January 6th about the riots. We also know that Donald Trump was responsible for the military not getting to the Capitol as quickly as they could have on January 6th. And here is the slow drip about the truth of Jordan's potential role on January 6th. My guess is that Jordan's fingerprints are all over the January 6th riots. I'm sure there was lots of locker room talk about it. And the idea, I mean, imagine Jim Jordan tried to argue his way into being an investigator of the January 6th riots. Good for Nancy Pelosi for saying you can't be on the panel, Jim. And the reality, as we now know it, is that this guy is almost certainly a witness to the inciting of that in his conversation with Donald Trump. And he may even be an accomplice in what took place on January 6th. Unbelievable, truly unbelievable. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. You can call that number absolutely anytime you want. You want to call it 4 a.m. like many people do, go ahead. Here is a voicemail just reminding us, this question of, do Trump supporters believe the stuff that's being said about the election or not? And Seinfeld is instructive in listening. Yeah, take a listen to this.
David, I wanted to
by the way, a classic is the caller doesn't pause the show. They call while my voice is playing in the background. That's going on here.
Now that, as we've all learned, from our friend George Costanza,
Right.
that it's not a lie if you believe it. And I'm hearing you struggle right now on your broadcast about whether a spokesperson for Trump is able to discern the truth from a delusion. Thank you. Bye.
Yes. I mean, I think it's just a line from Seinfeld, but I think it actually is instructive. It's not a lie if you believe it. And many of these people certainly have drank the Kool-Aid. And that's an appropriate term, given the cult-like nature of Trumpian followers and acolytes. We have a great bonus show for you today. Now, we're going to talk about Walmart offering tuition for employees. Is it a real, genuine thing? Is it a marketing ploy? Is it both? We will also talk about a federal judge forcing an accused Capitol rioter to unlock their laptop with facial recognition and what this means for the future of such investigations, and full mandatory masking returning to the state of Nevada. People told to avoid Las Vegas like the plague, although I don't even know if like the plague has the same meaning now, since many people didn't seem that into avoiding it. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Don't miss it. Sign up at joinpacman.com, and we will speak to you then. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Blast Light is the world's smallest and most convenient UVC disinfection light to help keep you safe against COVID-19. I take mine everywhere I go. Go to davidpacman.com/blastlight to get it for 40% off. The link is down below.